The room smelled like old paper and coffee. I remember that clearly because my hands were shaking and I needed something to focus on. We were sitting inside a quiet attorney's office, the kind of place where every sound feels too loud. My parents sat side by side on a leather couch. My brother Ethan sat across from them, relaxed, almost bored. And I sat alone, holding my breath without realizing it. The attorney cleared his throat and said, "Before we continue, does anyone have questions about the will?" My mother answered before anyone else could. "Yes," she said, her voice calm and firm. "Everything goes to Ethan." I thought I misheard her. I looked up, waiting for her to correct herself. She didn't. Then she added the words that still echo in my head. "Ella doesn't need anything." My heart dropped. I felt heat rush to my face, then nothing at all. It was like my body shut down to protect me from the pain. I wanted to speak, but no sound came out. That's when the attorney stood up, walked to the wall behind him, and slid a framed picture aside. Behind it was a metal safe dot. He turned the key, and in that moment, I knew my life was about to change. My name is Ella, and I was 27 years old when my parents decided, in front of strangers, that I was worth nothing to them. Before that day, I still believed in fairness. I believed that love, even when flawed, still meant something. I was wrong. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who didn't ask for much. Ethan was different. He was loud, charming, and always needed help. And my parents loved being needed by him. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was strong enough on my own. But sitting in that office, hearing my mother erase me so easily, something inside me cracked. I looked at Ethan. He didn't look shocked. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one. Like this outcome was expected. I felt betrayed not just by my parents, but by myself. For all the times I stayed quiet. For all the times I accepted less. My father finally spoke, his voice flat. "This is the most practical decision." Practical. That word hurt more than anger ever could. The attorney paused, his hand still resting on the safe. "There is one more item," he said slowly. My mother's face changed. Just for a second, fear, and that was when I realized something important. They knew something. I didn't. As the safe door began to open, I felt my pain turn into something else. Not hope, not yet, but awareness. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. While the attorney worked on the safe, my mind drifted backward to places I usually tried not to visit. Growing up, I learned early how to stay invisible. Ethan was always the center of the room. When he laughed, my parents laughed with him. When he failed, they rushed in to save him. When he succeeded, they told everyone. When I succeeded, they nodded and said, "That's nice, Ella." I was the kind of child who learned quickly that praise was rare, so I stopped expecting it. I cleaned without being asked. I got good grades without reminders. I handled my problems quietly, and my parents loved that about me. Not because it showed strength, but because it made me easy. When Ethan dropped out of college the first time, my parents paid his tuition to try again. When he dropped out the second time, they blamed stress. When I worked nights at a grocery store to pay for my own classes, my mother said, "You've always been so independent. We're proud of you." Proud, but never supportive. I remember once when I was 19, my car broke down on the side of the road. I called my father, crying, scared, and alone. He sighed and said, "Can you handle it yourself? Ethan needs me right now." I did handle it myself. I always did. That became my role in the family. The daughter who didn't need help. The daughter who didn't complain. The daughter who didn't cost anything. Over time, I stopped asking for space in their hearts, because it felt like there was none left for me. But my grandmother, Margaret, saw everything. She lived alone in a small house filled with memories and quiet afternoons. I visited her every weekend, even when I was tired. I brought groceries. I fixed her phone. I listened to the same stories over and over again. She used to hold my hand and say, "You remind me of myself." I didn't know then what she meant. When her health started to decline, I helped more. Not because I expected anything in return, but because love shouldn't keep score. My parents rarely visited her. Ethan almost never did, and still expected everything back in the attorney's office. The sound of the safe unlocking pulled me back to the present. My heart was beating fast now, not from fear, but from something new. Suspicion. I looked at my mother again. She couldn't meet my eyes. For the first time in my life, I wondered if my silence had been convenient for them. If my strength had been used against me and a painful truth settled in my chest. Maybe this wasn't just favoritism. Maybe it was a choice they had been making for years. The safe door opened with a soft click, and whatever was inside it was about to tell a story they never wanted told. The safe was open now, but the attorney didn't reach inside right away. Instead, he returned to his desk and adjusted his glasses, like he needed a moment to prepare himself. That pause felt cruel. He continued reading the will first, his voice steady, professional, almost emotionless. The family home, he said, will transfer to Ethan. My mother nodded slightly, as if this was already settled long ago. The savings accounts and investments, he continued, also transferred to Ethan. Each sentence landed on me like a quiet. No shouting, no drama, just clean, sharp cuts. I stared at the carpet, counting the lines so I wouldn't cry. I kept thinking, say my name, just once. But he didn't. When the reading ended, the attorney looked up. That concludes the main distribution. Main distribution. Like I was a side note. An afterthought. I finally found my voice, though it came out smaller than I expected. So, that's it. Everyone turned to look at me. My mother sighed, like I was being difficult. Ella, you understand this makes sense, does it? I asked quietly. My father folded his hands. You're doing well. Ethan needs stability. That word again. Need. I swallowed hard. I needed you to, I said, but only in my head. Ethan leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. For the first time, he spoke directly to me. You'll be fine, he said. You always are. That hurt more than anything else, because he was right. I had always been fine. Even when I WASN, single quotes. The attorney cleared his throat again, his tone changing slightly. There is one additional matter to address. My mother's head snapped up. Her lips pressed into a thin line. He stood and walked back to the safe. From inside, he removed a thick envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed carefully. He didn't open it. He turned toward me. This, he said, is addressed to Ella. The room went completely still. I felt dizzy, like the floor had shifted under my feet. My mother stood up too quickly. That's not relevant, she said sharply. That was years ago. The attorney didn't even look at her. It is very relevant. He handed me the envelope. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. On the front, written in careful handwriting, was my name, not typed, written. I knew that handwriting. My grandmother. My throat tightened as memories rushed back. Her quiet voice, her steady eyes, the way she always listened when no one else did. Ethan laughed nervously. What is that supposed to be? The attorney answered before I could. It appears to be a personal letter and legal documents tied to a separate trust. My father stood up now. Margaret never mentioned any trust. The attorney nodded calmly. She didn't need to. I looked at my parents, really looked at them. They weren't calm anymore. They weren't confident, they were afraid, and for the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. They hadn't given everything to Ethan because they could. They did it because they thought they could get away with it. I held the envelope close to my chest. I hadn't opened it yet, but I could feel it. This wasn't charity. This was truth. And once truth is spoken out loud, it never goes back into the safe. The envelope felt heavier than paper should feel. My fingers traced the edges before I opened it, like I was afraid the moment would disappear if I moved too fast. No one spoke. Even Ethan was quiet now. I broke the seal slowly. Inside were several documents neatly stacked, and on top of them, a folded letter. I didn't need to read the name at the bottom to know who wrote it. I unfolded the letter, and before I could stop myself, my eyes filled with tears. My sweet Ella. It began. My grandmother's voice filled my head so clearly it felt like she was sitting beside me. If you are reading this, then I am no longer here to say these words to your face. I am sorry for that. But some truths are easier to tell on paper. My hands shook as I kept reading. She wrote about watching me grow up quietly, about seeing how often I was overlooked, about noticing how I showed up for others even when no one showed up for me. You were never invisible to me, she wrote. You were strong and kind and alone more often than you should have been. A soft sound escaped my chest. I hadn't cried yet, but something inside me was breaking open. The letter explained everything. Years ago, my grandmother created a private trust in my name. She did it quietly, legally, and carefully. She didn't tell my parents because, in her words, they would try to control it. I looked up at my mother. Her face was pale. The trust included money, yes, but more than that, it included control over the small rental property my parents had been managing for years. Property they planned to sell without me. The attorney gently spoke. This trust gives Ella full authority. No one else has access. Ethan stood up. This is insane, he said. She didn't mean she meant exactly what she wrote. The attorney replied calmly. My father's voice was tight. Ella, you don't understand what this involves. I finally looked at him. Really looked. I understand more than you think, I said quietly. My mother reached out, her voice suddenly soft. We were going to tell you. I shook my head. No, you weren't. Silence fell again. I finished the letter. The last line stayed with me the most. You do not need permission to take up space in this world. Please don't shrink yourself anymore. I folded the letter and held it close. In that moment, I felt grief. For my grandmother. For the child I used to be. For the love I kept hoping would come. But I also felt something new: clarity. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about being seen, and now, standing in that office with the truth laid out in black and white, I realized something important. I wasn't taking anything from them. I was finally receiving what had always been mine. And nothing scares people more than a woman who finally knows her worth. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there holding my grandmother's letter. While the room slowly shifted around me, my parents started talking at the same time. Their voices low but urgent. Words like complicated family and misunderstanding floated through the air. I listened. But I wasn't really listening for the first time in my life. I wasn't trying to fix anything. The attorney explained the trust in clear, careful words. It was legal. It was protected. And it was mine. My mother interrupted him. Ella has never managed property before. The attorney nodded politely. She has full rights to appoint professionals. I met my mother's eyes. I already have, I said softly. That was the moment everything changed. Ethan stared at me. What do you mean? I took a slow breath. I've been preparing for a while, I said. Not for this, but for my own future. I told him about the business classes I took at night, the financial advisor I met once a month, the savings I built quietly, all the things I never talked about because no one ever asked. My father rubbed his temples. You should have told us. I almost laughed. I tried. I said, but you were always busy. The truth landed heavily in the room. The rental property sale they had planned. It was paused, legally, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because it was mine to decide. That was my revenge. Not taking something away, but refusing to give control back. Ethan's voice cracked. So what? You're just going to let us struggle? I looked at him carefully. I'm not responsible for fixing choices I didn't make. That sentence felt strange in my mouth, but also freeing. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt you. I believed her. And still, It didn't change anything. Hurt doesn't disappear just because someone regrets it. The meeting ended. Quietly, no shouting. No dramatic exits. Just heavy silence. Outside, the sun felt warmer than it had in years. I sat in my car and cried for a long time. Not because I won, but because I finally let myself feel everything I had buried. I grieved the family I thought I had, and accepted the one I actually did that day. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes it's simply choosing yourself after a lifetime of being overlooked, and that choice, it changes everything. I didn't go home right away after leaving the attorney's office. I drove without a plan, letting the road decide where I would end up. The radio was off. I needed silence to hear my own thoughts for the first time in years. I realized something during that drive. Winning doesn't always feel like happiness. Sometimes it feels like clarity. And clarity can hurt before it heals. In the weeks that followed, my family changed. Or maybe they didn't change at all. Maybe I just stopped pretending. My parents called more often. Their voices were careful now, like they were walking on thin ice. Ethan stopped calling altogether. And for once, I didn't chase any of them. I focused on myself. I met with the advisors my grandmother trusted. I read her letters again and again. Each time I noticed something new. She never once wrote about revenge. She wrote about safety, about independence, about giving me choices. That was her gift. I used the trust to stabilize the property, not sell it. I improved it. I made it something solid, something lasting, not to prove anything, but because I finally believed I deserved something stable too. One evening, a mother came over unannounced. She looked smaller than I remembered. "I didn't know how strong you were," she said quietly. I thought about that for a long time before answering. "I was strong because I had to be," I said. "But I shouldn't have had to be alone," she cried. "I didn't, because healing doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. I didn't cut my family off, but I changed the rules. I stopped shrinking. I stopped explaining. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, and something unexpected happened. I felt peace, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally accepted the truth. Some people love you in ways that are limited, and some love you so quietly that you don't notice until they're gone. My grandmother was the second kind. Her voice still guides me when I doubt myself. Her trust reminds me that being seen by one person can change an entire lifetime. If there's one lesson I learned, it's this: never confuse being easy to ignore with being unworthy. If you've been overlooked, silenced, or made to feel small, please hear me. Your worth does not need permission. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is becoming someone who no longer needs it. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Like the video, if you believe in quiet strength, subscribe for more stories about truth, healing, and self-worth. Because some truths don't shout. They wait patiently until you're ready to hear them.